Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel where we dive into all things gaming. Today, we're jumping into one of the most addictive tower defense games out there, Five Nights Tower Defense. If you're anything like me, you've probably spent way too many late night hours trying to figure out the perfect strategy to crush those waves of animatronics. Well, guess what? I've got you covered. We're talking about the best units to have on your team, especially with the latest Update 10 dropping some fresh new faces. In this video, we're breaking down our definitive Five Nights TD tier list. Whether you're a seasoned player looking to optimize your lineup or a newbie trying to make sense of all these creepy animatronics, this list is going to be your go-to guide. We've tested and ranked all the units, so you know exactly who's going to help you dominate those leaderboards. So buckle up and let's dive into the spooky world of Five Nights Tower Defense. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking units in Five Nights TD. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching!
A very small portion of the audience is subscribed to the channel. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like these types of videos. Thanks.
First, let's start with the early game units. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Summer Toy Bonnie, and Foxy. Alright, let's dive into some of the units you might want to avoid in the early game of Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we've got Toy Freddy. Now, I hate to say it, but Toy Freddy is really struggling. His range is short, which is a big no-no in a tower defense game, and his default DPS is only 20. That's just not going to cut it when you're trying to keep those waves of enemies at bay. He's more of a liability than an asset. Then we have Toy Bonnie, and unfortunately, things don't get much better here. Toy Bonnie's stats are all pretty underwhelming. You won't find a single area where he excels, making him a poor choice for your lineup. If you're trying to build a solid defense, you'll want to steer clear of this one and look for something with a bit more punch. Lastly, let's talk about Foxy and Summer Toy Bonnie. Starting with Summer Toy Bonnie, she does have a slowing effect, but don't let that fool you into thinking she's a must-have. Even with the slow, her overall performance is just bad. Honestly, you'd be better off sticking with a basic starter unit. As for Foxy, he's a melee character, and in a tower defense game, that's not what you want. He's got to get up close and personal with the enemies, which is a recipe for disaster. In short, these units are ones you'll want to skip if you're serious about surviving those early waves. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Rockin' Bonnie, Baker Toy Chica, Chica, and Withered Chica. Alright, let's talk about some C-tier units in Five Nights Tower Defense that you might encounter early in the game. Now, don't get me wrong, these units aren't completely useless, but they're definitely not the cream of the crop. First up, we've got Rockin' Bonnie. On paper, she seems like she's got it all with her full area of effect attacks, but honestly, there are better options out there. If you're looking for a solid starter, you might want to pass on her and look elsewhere. Next, we've got Baker Toy Chica. She's another explosion unit, and while she's not terrible, she's not exactly great either. If you're just getting started, she might serve you well for a bit, but don't expect her to carry you through the tough times. Baker Toy Chica is like that friend who's fun to hang out with at first, but then you realize there are better party companions as the night goes on. And then there's Chica and Withered Chica. These two are both explosion units, but they have their quirks. Regular Chica is super slow, so unless you're dealing with a horde of weak enemies, you're going to get frustrated real quick. As for Withered Chica, she's a slight improvement over Toy Bonnie, but that's not saying much. Let's be honest. You're probably better off just leaving her on the bench. So while these units can help you scrape by in the early game, don't get too attached. You'll want to upgrade as soon as possible. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Sniper Cupcake, Major Freddy, Commando Endo, Freddy, Pirate Withered Foxy, and Vendor Toy Chica. Let's talk about some of the B-tier early game units in Five Nights Tower Defense. These guys might not be the absolute best, but they definitely hold their own when you're just starting out. First up, we've got Sniper Cupcake. Now I know what you're thinking, a cupcake with a sniper? Well, it's as crazy as it sounds. Sniper Cupcake might not be packing the highest DPS, but what it lacks in raw damage, it makes up for with a super long range. This little guy can hit enemies from across the map, which is pretty handy early on. The downside? You can only place 3 of them, which kinda stinks, but still, it's worth a shot if you like playing the long game. Then there's Major Freddy. If you need a solid single target DPS, Major Freddy's your guy. He's a strong starter unit with a decent range, and the best part? You can place 4 of him on the field. That's double the firepower compared to Sniper Cupcake, so if you're looking for a reliable damage dealer to get you through the first few waves, Major Freddy's got your back. Now let's talk about Commando Endo. This unit is a bit of a mixed bag. Sure, his DPS isn't the best, but he makes up for it by summoning extra little dudes to help out. These summons can actually dish out some decent damage, so don't sleep on Commando Endo. He's one of those units that can really surprise you, especially when you're in a pinch. Finally, we've got Vendor Toy Chica. She's basically a budget version of Patriot Freddy, which means she's not as strong but still pretty solid for the early waves. If you're tight on resources or just want to mix things up a bit, Vendor Toy Chica is a decent choice. She's not going to carry your team, but she'll definitely pull her weight until you can upgrade to something better. So that's the rundown on these B tier units. They might not be the flashiest or the most powerful, but they've got their own unique strengths that make them worth considering when you're just starting out. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Phantom Foxy, Nightmare Freddy, Endo02, Phantom Cupcake, Rad Freddy, and Freddle. Alright, let's dive into some of the A tier early game units in Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we have Phantom Foxy. This guy is your go-to if you're looking for a cheap yet effective single target DPS unit. You can place up to 4 of him, and trust me, he'll carry you through those early levels without breaking a sweat. He's just solid and reliable, especially when you're still figuring things out. Next, let's talk about Nightmare Freddy. He's like Phantom Foxy's slightly clunkier cousin. He's got that strong single target damage you need, but with a bit less range. That said, he's perfect for those tight, compact stages early on in the story where range isn't as big of a deal. Nightmare Freddy is definitely a great pick when you need a heavy hitter in those close quarter battles. Now, Endo02 is another strong contender with decent range and single target DPS. However, if we're being honest, Phantom Foxy kind of outshines him in most situations. That doesn't mean Endo02 is useless though, he's just not as flashy. If you're a fan of versatility and range, Endo02 still has a place on your team, but you might find yourself leaning on Foxy a bit more. Lastly, let's not forget Rad Freddy. This guy is essentially the turbocharged version of Sniper Cupcake, boasting almost double the DPS while keeping similar stats across the board. He's a fantastic pick for early game dominance, but we also have Phantom Cupcake, who is a solid choice with some of the highest DPS among starters, and Freddle, who's a step above Commando Endo, though his cooldown might hold him back from being top tier. That said, all of these units are strong choices, so mix and match to find what works best for you. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Patriot Freddy, Witch Toy Chica, and Tarnished Spring Bonnie. Alright, let's dive into some of the absolute best S tier early game units in Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we've got Patriot Freddy. This guy is an absolute must-have when you're just starting out. Not only is he ultra cheap, but he's also packing some serious firepower with his explosion attacks. If you've got a big wave of enemies coming your way and you're panicking, just drop Patriot Freddy in and watch him wipe out those waves like it's nothing. Next on the list is Witch Toy Chica, who is basically the queen of early game units. I mean, she's got it all. She's affordable, she's reliable, and she's versatile. Whether you're facing down a boss or dealing with mobs, Witch Toy Chica's got your back. She's one of those units that you can just drop in almost any situation, and she'll come through for you every time. Honestly, if you're not using her, you're missing out on some serious potential. And then there's Tarnished Spring Bonnie. Now, I know what you're thinking, melee units in a tower defense game, but trust me, Tarnished Spring Bonnie is an absolute beast. Her damage output is crazy and her range is surprisingly good for a melee unit. The only downside, she's a bit harder to get your hands on compared to Patriot Freddy or Witch Toy Chica. But if you do manage to snag her, she's going to be a game changer for your early game strategy. So keep an eye out and don't sleep on Tarnished Spring Bonnie. Now let's continue with the best units in mid-game. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Cupcake Tank, Golden Freddy, Toy Chica, and Balloon Boy. Alright, let's dive into the darker side of Five Nights Tower Defense, where we talk about those units that make you question your life choices. Let's start with the Cupcake Tank. Now, I'm not sure who thought this was a good idea, but honestly, the Cupcake Tank does absolutely nothing. I mean, sure, it looks cute, but its summons are so irrelevant that it might as well be invisible on the battlefield. In fact, I'm pretty sure you'd get more value from literally not placing anything at all. Next up, we've got Golden Freddy. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Golden Freddy as much as the next FNAF fan, but in Five Nights TD, yikes! The DPS is just way too low, and the cost ridiculously high. It's like paying premium prices for a paperweight. Seriously, if you want to watch your in-game currency disappear faster than a ghost, go ahead and place Golden Freddy, otherwise steer clear. And then there's Toy Chica and Balloon Boy. Toy Chica, bless her heart, just doesn't have the range or DPS to be anything more than a pretty face. But Balloon Boy? Oh boy. Imagine taking everything wrong with Toy Chica and slapping a 4 times higher price tag on it. Yeah, Balloon Boy is arguably the worst thing in Five Nights TD. It's like throwing your resources into a black hole and expecting a win. Spoiler alert, you won't get one, so save yourself the headache and avoid these D-tier disasters. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Endo03, Bonnie, Withered Foxy, Nightmare Chica, and Nightmare Cupcake. Alright, let's dive into the C-tier units for Five Nights Tower Defense and see why these guys are more of a last resort than top-tier choices. First up is Endo03. Now, Endo03 might not be the shining star of the mid-game, but if your roster's looking a bit bleak, he's not the worst option. He's got a decent single target DPS and a placement count of 4, which gives him a bit of versatility. However, don't expect him to carry your defenses or outshine more advanced units. Next on the list is Bonnie. Think of Bonnie as a Withered Freddy but with a longer range and lower DPS. While this might sound like an upgrade, it actually comes with a higher placement and upgrade cost. This makes Bonnie a bit of a hard sell when you have better options at your disposal. And then we have Withered Foxy, which used to be quite the meta pick. Unfortunately, times have changed, and Withered Foxy is now outclassed by newer, more effective mid-game units. It might still work as a starter, but there are definitely more efficient picks. Finally, let's talk about Nightmare Chica and Nightmare Cupcake. Nightmare Chica is infamous for her high cost, short range, and underwhelming DPS. She's definitely not the go-to for mid-game, but she's a tad better than some of the worst offenders. Nightmare Cupcake, on the other hand, struggles with being a single target DPS in a game where multi-target damage is crucial. Her current state makes her less viable in the mid-game, so consider other options before placing her in your lineup. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Algae Fredbear, Coco Boy, Withered Freddy, Artillery Puppet, Glitched Cupcake, and Nightmare Balloon Boy. Alright, let's dive into the B tier mid-game units for Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we've got Algae Fredbear. Now, this guy is like a toned-down version of Withered Golden Freddy. Despite being a bit less powerful, he's still pretty solid and can hold his own with 3 max placements. If you're looking for a decent mid-game pick, he's not a bad choice. Next, let's talk about Coco Boy. He's an upgrade from Balloon Boy, but honestly, not by much. The big selling point for Coco Boy is his explosion radius, which can be quite handy. Still, he's more of a mid-tier choice-y, so don't expect him to be a game changer. He's alright for the mid-game, but doesn't quite shine like some of the other units. Moving on, we've got Withered Freddy. This guy is a continuous unit with pretty solid DPS and a placement count of 3. The catch here is his high upgrade costs. While he's effective, those upgrade costs can make him a bit of a pain, especially compared to some other mid-game units that are a bit more budget-friendly. Lastly, we have Artillery Puppet. This unit brings long-range explosion damage to the table, which is great if you're missing other AoE options. The only downside is the cooldown, which isn't ideal. If you don't have other AoE units though, Artillery Puppet can definitely fill that gap. On the flip side, Glitched Cupcake is a full AoE unit with solid DPS but suffers from a low range. It's just not as impressive as some of the other mid-game options. And then there's Nightmare Balloon Boy, who, despite being a mythic unit, falls short with low DPS and range, not the most viable option if you're aiming for a strong mid-game setup. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, 7 Seas Foxy, Nightmare Foxy, Phantom Balloon Boy, Rocketeer Mangle, Phantom Golden Freddy, Endo04, Nightmare Fredbear, and Mercenary Foxy. Alright, let's dive into some of the A tier units you'll want to consider for the mid-game in Five Nights Tower Defense. If you're looking for a solid lineup to keep those pesky animatronics at bay, these units are definitely worth your attention. First up is 7 Seas Foxy. Think of him as a toned-down version of Leviathan Mangle, but with the advantage of a longer range. He's a great mid-game choice for dealing with mobs thanks to his recent buffs, making him a reliable pick when you need to fend off swarms of enemies. Next, we've got Nightmare Foxy. He's got some serious potential, comparable to PBB with his damage output. The key difference is his lower cooldown and extended range, though he does have a smaller AoE. If you're looking for something with a bit more finesse and efficiency, Nightmare Foxy is your guy. Now let's talk about Phantom Balloon Boy. His massive damage, range, and AoE make him an absolute beast in the mid-game. If you're struggling with large groups, this guy will definitely help turn the tide in your favor. He's a must-have if you want to crush those waves of animatronics. Then there's Rocketeer Mangle. Despite having one of the highest DPS among explosion units, his low range is a bit of a drawback. However, don't let that fool you, he still packs a punch and can be incredibly effective if you position him well. On the flip side, Phantom Golden Freddy is a bit of a letdown compared to Withered Golden Freddy, but he's still strong enough to be a viable mid-game unit. Finally, we have Endo04 and Nightmare Fredbear. Endo04's Cone AoE burn attack is perfect for dealing with packs, but he falls short compared to Flame Empress Chica. Meanwhile, Nightmare Fredbear is solid but doesn't quite measure up to top-tier units like War Machine Foxy. And let's not forget Mercenary Foxy, who's budget-friendly and versatile, allowing you to deploy multiple units at once. So, there you have it. A lineup of A-tier units that can help you dominate the mid-game in Five Nights Tower Defense. Experiment with these guys and see which combination works best for your strategy. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Circuit Breaker Freddy, Scott, War Machine Foxy, Sentinel Bonnie, Withered Golden Freddy, and Flame Empress Chica. Alright, let's dive into the creme de la creme of mid-game units in Five Nights TD. If you're looking to dominate the game during this stage, these S-tier units are going to be your best friends. First up, we've got Circuit Breaker Freddy. This guy is a beast when it comes to single target DPS. If you need a unit that can really focus on taking down those tougher enemies, Freddy's your go-to. Sure, he comes with a bit of a hefty placement cost, but his damage output more than makes up for it. Just make sure you've got the budget to get him on the field. Now, let's talk about Scott. Honestly, Scott is like the cheat code for mid-game. With insane damage, splash effects, and a range that feels almost unfair, this unit can pretty much carry you through the mid-game all by himself. Plus, he's got 6 upgrade levels, so you're looking at a lot of potential for growth. If you haven't used Scott yet, you're in for a treat. Moving on, we've got War Machine Foxy. Foxy's combination of high stats and low placement cost makes him an absolute gem. You can get him up and running quickly, which means you'll be able to start focusing on those more expensive units sooner. It's a smooth transition from early to mid-game with Foxy on your team. And let's not forget Sentinel Bonnie. Bonnie takes the already fantastic War Machine Foxy and cranks it up a notch. With a slight DPS drop but a significant boost in range, Bonnie is one of the best choices for mid-game. If you're looking for a unit that can cover more ground and still pack a punch, Bonnie's your answer. For a bit of an extra edge, consider Withered Golden Freddy. While he has a higher placement cost, his overall DPS is impressive and might even surpass Sentinel Bonnie's. Just be ready to invest a bit more to unlock his full potential. And finally, Flame Empress Chica. This unit is just phenomenal. With solid range, damage, and splash burn attacks, Empress is a powerful mid-game contender. Her splash burn increases her effective DPS, making her a top pick for any mid-game strategy. There you have it. These S-tier mid-game units are sure to give you the upper hand in Five Nights TD. Happy gaming! Finally, let's talk about the best units for a late game. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Mangle, Puppet, Amalgam, and Fazcade. Alright folks, let's dive into the not-so-great side of Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we've got Mangle. Now, Mangle's DPS, range, and explosion radius are just dismal. Honestly, I don't see any reason to use it over other late-game units unless you're feeling particularly nostalgic for the Puppet. And speaking of the Puppet, it's a real letdown. Despite numerous rebalancing attempts, it's still one of the lowest DPS units in the game. If you want to save yourself from an epic headache, just steer clear and go for something that actually delivers. Next on our list is Amalgam. This one's a bit of a head-scratcher. As the second slow unit introduced, its slow effect isn't nearly as impactful as having high DPS. In the grand scheme of things, you're way better off with units that can deal damage fast rather than relying on Amalgam's mediocre slowing capabilities. Finally, we've got Fazcade, the game's first money farming unit. Unfortunately, it's pretty much useless in any game mode. If you're thinking about investing in Fazcade, you might want to reconsider. There are far better options out there that will actually help you progress and win. So save your resources and use them on units that make a real difference. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Shadow Freddy, Phantom Freddy, Phantom Chica, and Nightmare Bonnie. Alright, let's dive into some of the C-tier units in Five Nights TD, specifically focusing on those late game and support roles. First up is Shadow Freddy. While he might have a cool spooky vibe, his performance leaves a lot to be desired. With low total DPS and a small AoE range, he falls short compared to other units like Shadow Bonnie or Blighted Endo Freddy. If you're looking for efficiency and effectiveness, Shadow Freddy might not be your best bet. Next, we have Phantom Freddy. For a unit costing $15k, Phantom Freddy just doesn't cut it. His low placement count, DPS, and range make him rather underwhelming. Honestly, he could use a bit of a buff to make him more competitive in the late game. On the flip side, Phantom Chica is a bit of a diamond in the rough. When fully upgraded, she actually holds her own quite well. Her low cooldown, large AoE explosions, and decent damage make her a solid choice. Much better than Mangle if you ask me. Finally, Nightmare Bonnie might boast one of the highest single target DPSs in the game, but his limited range and lack of AoE capability make him less effective than you'd hope. So there you have it, a rundown of some C-tier units that might not make the cut in the late game or support roles. If you're strategizing your lineup, these are the ones you might want to keep on the back burner. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right. Marionette's Puppeteer Withered Bonnie, Nightmare Phantom Puppet, Endo and Hawaii Endo 02. Alright, let's dive into the B tier units for late game and support roles in Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we have Marionette's Puppeteer. If you're playing on a budget, this unit is a solid pick. It boasts impressive AoE DPS when fully upgraded. The catch? Its range is a bit on the short side, so you'll need to position it carefully, but hey, for its price, it definitely pulls its weight. Next, we have Withered Bonnie. Think of Withered Bonnie as a long-range, single-target version of Shadow Freddy. While its stats might not be the top of the line compared to other endgame units, its affordability makes it a worthwhile investment. If you're looking for something that won't break the bank but still gets the job done, Withered Bonnie is a great choice. Moving on to Nightmare, this unit offers big AoE and poison effects, which can be handy. However, its DPS isn't quite enough to push it into the top tier. It's more of a niche pick. It works well if you need that extra layer of crowd control, but don't expect it to be your main damage dealer. Finally, let's talk about Phantom Puppet and Endo. Phantom Puppet is like a beefed up version of Leviathan Mangle, but be wary. It can be a bit of overkill until you're really deep into endless mode. On the support side, Endo boosts damage effectively, though Spring Bonnie still holds the crown in this department. And don't forget about Hawaii Endo 02. This unit's extra range means your DPS units get more uptime, making it one of the strongest supports in the game right now. So if you're looking to maximize your team's performance, Hawaii Endo 02 is a must-have. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Bounded Shadow Plainboy Leviathan Mangle, Enforcer Bonnie, Spring Bonnie, Nightmare Mangle, and Fredbear. Alright, let's dive into the A-tier late-game support units in Five Nights Tower Defense, where things really start to heat up. First up, we've got Bounded Shadow. This unit is a powerhouse when it comes to piercing attacks. Its DPS is through the roof, rivaling some of the continuous units you'll encounter later in the game. The trade-off? It has a pretty limited range and only allows for 2 placements, so while it can pack a punch, you'll need to strategically place it to make the most of its firepower. Next, let's talk about Plain Boy. This unit is not cheap, but oh boy, is it worth it. With exceptional range and DPS, it's a top-tier choice for taking down tough enemies. The downside is that it has the same placement count issue as Bounded Shadow, meaning you can only set down 2 of these bad boys. So while it's impressive, it's a bit outclassed by Phantom Mangle and others with higher placement counts. Now, if you're looking for a versatile unit, Leviathan Mangle is your go-to. It's fantastic for dealing with swarms of enemies thanks to its piercing abilities, and its single target DPS isn't too shabby either. It strikes a solid balance between handling multiple foes and focusing on tougher targets. Finally, let's not forget Fredbear. If you're a fan of Hawaii Endo 02, Fredbear is like that unit's more powerful cousin. With improved range and an extra placement slot, Fredbear gives you more flexibility and firepower. Plus, it's just a solid all-around unit that fits well into various strategies. So whether you're looking to pierce through crowds, deal with powerful foes, or just need that extra bit of support, these A-tier units have got you covered. Make sure to use them wisely and watch as they help you conquer those challenging levels. The units in this tier are in order from top left to bottom right: Glitched Puppeteer, Valkyrie Chica, Phantom Mangle, Blighted Endo Freddy, Shadow Bonnie, Abyssal Foxy, Springtrap, and the Crying Child. Alright, let's dive into some of the absolute powerhouses of the late game and support units in Five Nights TD. These units are the creme de la creme, the ones you want in your arsenal when you're aiming for those endless rounds and top scores. First up, we've got the Glitched Puppeteer. This unit is like Scott's final form with an incredible range and the highest effective DPS in the game. Its only downside, you can only place 3 of them. But honestly, with the kind of damage it dishes out, you'll be glad it's not more. This unit is just broken in the best way possible. Next on the list is Valkyrie Chica. If you're looking for top-tier single target DPS without breaking the bank, Valkyrie Chica is your go-to. It's super cheap to place and upgrade, making it a total powerhouse in the late game. If you've got this unit, you're practically guaranteed to crush your enemies. Now let's talk Phantom Mangle. When it comes to single target DPS, Phantom Mangle is one of the absolute best. Plus, it has more placement spots than Valkyrie Chica, which means you can deploy more of them to keep those pesky enemies at bay. It's a solid choice if you need that extra firepower. And we can't forget Blighted Endo Freddy and Shadow Bonnie. Blighted Endo Freddy is a full AoE unit with great range and solid DPS, though it's a bit of a gamble compared to Marionette. Shadow Bonnie, on the other hand, is a nearly 50% stronger version of Blighted Endo Freddy with a shorter range, but comes at a high cost. It's a real investment, but in Endless mode, it's totally worth it. Lastly, let's give a shout out to Abyssal Foxy and Springtrap. Abyssal Foxy, especially after its buffs, is now arguably the strongest continuous DPS unit in FNTD. The permanent slow effect it provides is incredibly OP. Springtrap, with its insane DPS and 5 piercing projectiles, is another game changer. The only catch is its 2 unit placement limit, but it's definitely worth the squeeze. Oh, and don't sleep on the Crying Child. It's like Amalgam, but with a serious upgrade. Slowing enemies in a cone by 50% and being able to place 2 of them makes it an amazing pick for those endless rounds. That's it for today's look at the top late game and support units in Five Nights TD. Let me know in the comments which of these you're using in your setup and if you've got any tips or tricks to share. See you in the next video. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe,